I'm very happy to introduce our guest, Judy Morsigan. She became a very good friend of AUA. Every time Judy is in Armenia, she offers her help to spread the news about many challenging topics related to health, public health, women's health, and she doesn't hesitate to meet with our students, faculty members, public health professionals, and every time we have a seminar, it's usually very, very interesting because she's touching upon topics that are quite challenging, and sometimes there is no right or wrong answer to debates about certain topics. But she has been promoting in her life women's health a lot and women's empowerment. And today's topic is global commercial surrogacy, gene editing, and egg provision by younger women. But I would like to say a few words about Judy before we move to her presentation. And I hope we'll have an interesting discussion at the end of during her presentation. There might be some questions. So, and there are some materials that Judy brought for our audience. So it's a 2-pager. Please take them with you. So Judy Morsigan was a founding member of our Bodies Ourselves in 1971, served as its executive director from 2015, and currently chairs the board of this organization, best known for the landmark publication Our Bodies Ourselves. She authored all 8 Simon and Schuster editions of this book, named by the U.S. Library of Congress as one of the 88 books that shaped America. She was also a member of the editorial team that produced Our Bodies Ourselves, Menopause, and Our Bodies Ourselves, Pregnancy and Birth. And it seeks to advance the health and human rights of women and girls globally. Judy has appeared on hundreds of television and radio programs, including the NBC Nightly News, Al Jazeera, The Today's Show, etc. She served on the board of the National Women's Health Network and Public Responsibility in Medicine and Research. Currently, she serves on the board of Women who supports Boston area social justice organizations, payroll deduction charge program. She's a former board member of AIBA, the Armenian International Association, and continues to volunteer with the organization. Personal recognition includes a public service award from the Massachusetts Public Health Association, the Radcliffe College Alumni Association Annual Recognition Award, and the Massachusetts Health Council Award. She was also named one of the 21st leaders for the 21st century by Women's News and holds honorary doctorate from Boston University and Science College. So, Judy, thank you for being with us today, and the board is yours.
Can I add 2 words too? I would like to say, those who are new to this community, I just want to introduce yourself. Oh, thank you. I'm Bella Abaki, I'm the library director of the university. I would like to say Judy Morsigan 2 years ago sent her collection, private collection, to our library. And we have a huge, big collection on women's issue, on psychology, on mental health, on different issues related to women. So, thank you again, Judy, for the collection that we have, and it is open to the public.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Bella.
Oops. Thank you, Bella. And there are more books we have donated to the Femme Library, which is down near the corner of Saryan and Bagramyan. It's a wonderful project. Many women in the diaspora are now donating their books about many interesting topics. And there are more such books coming, so that's exciting. I want to thank Bartoli and everyone else for this invitation, and I feel honored to be here again. For me and many other diasporans, AUA is a very say that although I'm not speaking about the general work of our bodies ourselves today, a very specific topic today, tomorrow afternoon at the Aiken Gallery, there will be a more open conversation about women's health issues, and there will be a looping slideshow. There's many, many interesting slides about the work we have been doing in other areas of women's health. And those slideshows and this slideshow will all be available online, so you don't have to absorb everything today. I also put a fair amount of text in these slides so that I can go through them quickly and you can go back for reference. It's a very interesting topic right now in the United States, hugely controversial. Now, I want to just cover some terminology, because I will be using terminology. It's very important to describe the terms you use. So I will be talking about a gestational mother. Many of you hear them referred to as surrogates. They're used interchangeably. A woman who gestates and delivers a baby for another, often in exchange for money. And I use this term because she is one of the central people involved. The term gestational carrier, commonly used in marketing and other literature in the United States, reduces the gestational mother to a mere vehicle, pouch, or incubator for the baby. That is misleading. She is not just an incubator. She's not just a carrier. She is actually one of the mothers at the birth of that baby. Now, she may relinquish her legal rights at that point, but she still is a mother. And even if the egg that is contributed to the embryo, to development of the embryo, comes from another woman, so you say there's another genetic mother, there's mitochondrial DNA that comes from the gestational mother, so she even has somewhat of a genetic connection as well. The intended parent is a term I will use to refer to the person hiring the gestational mother to gestate and deliver the baby. Gestational surrogacy is the practice of using eggs and sperm from the intended parents or donors to impregnate a gestational mother with the help of ARTs. That refers to assisted reproductive technology, like egg retrieval, in vitro fertilization, and embryo transfer. It differs from traditional surrogacy, which uses the gestational mother's own eggs. You probably, if you watched the literature a few decades ago, remember the famous Baby M case about the New Jersey mother. She was a so-called surrogate. She used her own egg and the sperm of the intended father. It became a huge issue. Many, many articles and news items about this controversy, because when the baby was born, the mother of Baby M decided she wanted to keep the baby. That's why it was so controversial. That's, by the way, a very rare phenomenon. Most of the women who give birth and intend to give the baby up to some other couple, they do that. They want the money. That's why they go into it. Maybe altruism is part of their motivation, but it's, the money has to be there. Commercial surrogacy is the contract-based practice of hiring, paying a gestational mother in a gestational surrogacy arrangement. The commonly used shorthand surrogacy does not highlight the commercial nature of these arrangements. Transnational commercial surrogacy is the contract-based practice of hiring and paying a gestational mother from a country other than that of intended parents. Until recently, the country in the world where most American intended parents went was, who knows? It was India. India has since banned transnational commercial surrogacy, so U.S. couples cannot go to India and hire a surrogate there anymore. Egg providers are women who provide eggs for other people's fertility treatments or biomedical research. The commonly used term egg donors is not accurate, as these are typically commercial transactions. Sometimes a woman does this for a sister or a relative, and she undergoes egg retrieval, and she does it for free. But almost all the time, it's done for money. And that is egg retrieval for pay, which is what you see most often in the United States and elsewhere now. So, just a big picture moment. The discovery and development of all of these technologies, in vitro fertilization, embryo transfer, etc., has introduced a world in which we can do things we never dreamed possible before. Egg retrieval for pay, commercial surrogacy. And what we are now doing is getting human gametes and using
bodily spaces for money in a way that can sometimes overstep ethical boundaries. We have a profit-driven and mostly unregulated market here, and that's part of our problem. The primary suppliers are women. We know what that means. Typically, women are generally not respected, and when they become the suppliers in industries like this, they're often not treated well. And I put choose in quotes because sometimes the payment provides such an incentive that women do things that are against their own health and well-being. There's no legal oversight in many cases, no mechanisms to guarantee that payment is in fact made. That was a problem in India. We come to this picture with a problem. Now, my organization, Our Bodies Ourselves, partnered with the Center for Genetics and Society and several other groups to develop a website primarily geared to intended parents called surrogacy360.org. And here is the few of these cards. If any of you want to take it for some reason. Since my organization has become a volunteer-driven nonprofit, we don't have the staff to maintain this in the way we would like, so the Center for Genetics and Society, which is based in Berkeley, California, has taken over management of this website. This is the new screenshot from, if you go to the website, you won't see that picture anymore, you'll see this picture. There are some changes they made that our organization has found problematic, and we're working with them in fixing that. Mostly, we're in total agreement with what they have done. So, I want to talk briefly about the intersection of commercial surrogacy and egg retrieval for pay. Striking similarities, where motivations and forces driving these practices, fertility centers tend to overlap. For example, they both follow competitive market principles with demand from intended parents and profit margins of brokers, agencies, and clinics setting prices of supply. They have no structural motivation to represent or act in the interests of gestational mothers or egg providers, all women. Ensure that one party delivers goods acceptable to the other party, often with minimal contact between the two. Now, this question of delivering goods, especially for the gestational mother, has introduced a huge controversy of whether or not surrogacy is the selling, the buying and selling of children. And I'm going to get to that in a minute because the United Nations rapporteur on this topic has come out just last month with a very controversial report that went to the UN General Assembly. She basically is saying it is payment for human beings unless you give the money to the woman before the baby is delivered. And that even if there is a stillborn baby, she keeps the money. So there's a real controversy right there. Downplay the health risks of to egg providers, gestational mothers, and often to resulting children. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Now, because of the activism of the women's movement in India, commercial surrogacy is now banned in that country as of 2019, even for Indian citizens. First it was all foreigners, and now it's Indian citizens. The only form of legal surrogacy now is altruistic surrogacy via a close relative. However, as you might imagine, there are illegal operations in India because they cannot police this effectively. For an important background, I'm referring you to this wonderful documentary made in India, produced by a young, not so young Indian woman now, and Rebecca Hamowitz, both based in Brooklyn, New York, not in the States. And a more recently produced documentary, much shorter, 40 minutes, produced by an Indian filmmaker in conjunction with our colleagues, Sama Resource Group for Women in Health in Delhi. And this is a documentary we've used in schools of public health, like Beam School of Public Health, and had some very interesting conversations. This is more told from the perspective of the gestational mother, so-called surrogate. These are just a couple of quotes from some of the Indian women's activists that led, ultimately, to the banning of commercial surrogacy. You can read this for yourself. These are just two of about a dozen very outspoken, prominent feminist activists. Some of them involved with legislative actions on a whole range of women's issues. India has one of the strongest women's evidence-based information or adopt best practices. We'll say more about that later. Commodification of women's bodies as a means to highly valued products, eggs and babies. Use of marketing techniques and messaging that encourage eugenic decision-making by intended parents. This may include sex and trait selection. This is going to get to our later conversation about what should and shouldn't be appropriate and what should and shouldn't be the role of gene editing, now that we can do that much more effectively. Co-opting the language of choice and equity to justify the industry's practices. Disingenuously relying on the language of gifts and women helping women. You can see that the rhetoric here could be very, very insidious. This is just a little bit about can we see the baby bump, please? This gives you a 10-minute YouTube trailer. And we have copies of this DVD in the United States and freely share it with schools of public health. You can, I think, probably get it online. So here's some selected concerns for egg providers. These are largely the young women who undergo risks of egg extraction to provide eggs, mostly for procreative purposes. Somebody who wants to have a baby. But in some states in the United States, one state is just made this legal, California. You can provide eggs for research. Health risks associated with the retrieval process, some still not adequately studied, include the negative effects of drugs used to suppress ovarian function, as well as those that stimulate ovaries. Failure to cancel a cycle when medically indicated. When a woman starts to react very strongly to particularly these drugs that stimulate the ovaries and produce multiple follicles, it's much more likely to be dangerous for the woman. We have good data now that show if you're producing more than 20 eggs, you're much more likely to be hospitalized. The most serious effect of this overstimulation is a condition called ascites. And that is when fluid builds up in the abdomen. And if that fluid is not pumped out soon enough, the woman will die. And we have at least a couple of reported deaths. So this is not common to have huge problems, but they do occur. We have minimal or no collection of short or long-term safety data, and little or no access, formal or informal, to egg providers for emotional support. Now I have a few footnotes here on an incredibly wonderful organization in the United States. I think they have a lot of Canadian members. It's called We Are Egg Donors. These are women who currently or formerly provided eggs, who come together to share their experiences. What kind of informed consent did they have? What were they told? What experiences did they have? Since we have not done a good job of long-term follow-up, we have to rely upon anecdotal evidence at this point. The short-term studies are problematic in numbers of ways, which I won't get into right now. In the United States, we have one voluntary registry. It's administered at Dr. Hitchcock Medical Center in New Hampshire by a woman, Dr. Judy Stern. They were hoping for thousands of volunteer registrants. They have only about 1,000. And the reason? The fertility centers in the United States would not promote awareness of this voluntary registry. Why, you might ask? Is it because it might hurt their bottom line? We wonder. All right, move on. These are some of the ads that appear in college newspapers. We have about 25 of them. They really ask a young woman to think about doing the right thing, being altruistic, but then underscore that you can get a lot of money. Minimally $6,000 to $8,000 you can get. But there are ads for particular donors, high SAT scores, white Caucasian athlete. We've seen ads for $80,000 and $100,000. If you are the right young woman, you can get a lot of money for providing your eggs. This one seeks a Korean egg donor. Not paying that much money. This is an egg donor needed. This is UCLA. This is an ad that's from basically one of these centers. I'm not including the ads from private folks in the newspapers. Now, in response, my organization produced an ad like this. We haven't gotten into that many college newspapers yet, but we're working on it. We want young women to stop and think, do you know the risks, known and unknown? Think about it before you do it. And so this is the kind of counter-advertising we need to see. There's also a huge controversy about egg freezing. They're encouraging women, places like Apple and Facebook and all these big, Microsoft, I think even, they're telling their employees, you want to be a good employee now and just work on your career, don't have a baby now, freeze your eggs and try to have a baby later, and they pay for the process and for the egg freezing. What's missing from this conversation is the fact that success with frozen eggs is still very minimal. It's not that successful, even with some of the newer freezing techniques. Cryopreservation has gotten up to, higher standards. I'm just leaving a little link in here if you want to read more about this. We're trying to encourage young women, number one, not to undergo these risks themselves. Number two, to understand that your likelihood of getting pregnant later with a frozen egg is not as great as you think. Now, originally they did this freezing of eggs for women who had cancer, and they were going to undergo chemotherapy, and they had all kinds of reasons to freeze their eggs because they might be infertile after their cancer treatment. That was the reason egg freezing first came onto the landscape. Now it's being used in a very commercial way, and ways that are really not that useful. Most young women have to understand that their fertility will decline, and their ability to have a baby well into their 30s is going to be less than in their early 20s. It's just a fact, and we shouldn't pretend otherwise. Risk to children. Women's health advocates have primarily focused on the health and rights of gestational mothers and egg providers, but there's growing international recognition of the impact of commercial surrogacy and egg retrieval for pay on resulting children. Children commissioned by intended parents, I put that in quotes, genetically linked to egg providers and birthed by gestational mothers. The impact on men includes health risks, especially due to a higher incidence of multiples and preterm delivery. This is getting into the controversy of multiple embryo implantation, which we'll get to in a minute, and psychological and identity issues downstream. We are now trying to build allies for a stronger global response. In 2014, at The Hague, there was an international forum in intercountry adoption and surrogacy. And nearly 100 scholars, activists, and policymakers discussed ways to improve international standards around the evolving practices of cross-border adoption and surrogacy. We're still working on the feasibility of a convention on international surrogacy. These are takeaways from The Hague Forum. Some consider commercial surrogacy unacceptable on the grounds that it commodifies and commercializes both babies and women's reproductive capacities, or because of health and human rights risks. Others believe that surrogacy is a form of labor and should be handled by improving labor conditions for gestational mothers. This perspective was mainly voiced by researchers who have spent considerable time with gestational mothers themselves. And I will add that there were a few women here who have spent a great deal of time with paid sex workers in Europe, and they wanted to see surrogacy as a kind of form of paid labor, just like sex workers were and are, and that their conditions as paid gestational carriers should be governed, should be monitored, and should be regulated. Adoptees who have worked on adoption reform were extremely concerned about children born in these practices, and that decades of work in the adoption field, especially regarding preservation of records and open adoption, would be undone in surrogacy arrangements, which are taking place in an open global market without regulation. Most of these surrogacy arrangements are involving privacy going forward. As you'll see in a couple of slides, this is so controversial among the tens of thousands of not only adoptees, but children born of ART arrangements, of surrogacy arrangements, where they are now speaking up and saying, you have no right to keep from us our genetic origins. Given this day and age with 23andMe and all the other ways in which you can find people who've shared their genetic information and you can match yourself with someone else, there's no such thing as genetic privacy anymore. We'll talk about that in a minute. Of course, there's no consensus. These are questions needing further attention. What international legal and human rights principles should be followed in transnational commercial surrogacy? Are there practices that would satisfy such principles? What international medical standards and principles should be followed in transnational commercial surrogacy and egg retrieval for pay? Are there best medical practices that should be followed? At the UN, the Special Rapporteur addressing human rights concerns surrounding surrogacy has proposed the following for discussion. And this gets into, I won't take you there, but this gets into the most recent recommendations. She is suggesting that unless we are clear about when the money is given, this is payment for children and it should be prohibited. Her name is Maud Deborah Bucicchio, and I do not know how to pronounce her name. She's a special rapporteur on the sale and sexual exploitation of children, including child prostitution, child pornography, and other child sexual abuse material. This is comment from her report to the 74th session of the General Assembly just last month. You can see for yourself, while not all forms of surrogacy amount to sale of children, this practice, and particularly in its commercial form with the involvement of for-profit intermediaries, often involves abusive practices in which children are being traded as mere commodities. She references several scandals. She says if not properly regulated, surrogacy arrangements risk compromising the fundamental rights of the child to human dignity, the right to identify, including nationality, access to origins, and the enjoyment of family life. This is hugely controversial. Now, in the United States, right now, we are engaged in a very important effort to influence the New York State legislature, which is reconsidering a bill to legalize commercial surrogacy in that state. This is a state-by-state effort in the United States. We're very sympathetic to the interests of gay men. Here are two gay men who are on either side of a gestational mother. We all know of stories where a gestational mother has given birth to a baby and gay men were able to parent as a result. I know gay men who are wonderful parents. This is not in any way to be negative about gay men as parents. What it is to say that many of the organizations, and some of them are listed right there, are misguided at the moment in supporting a bill that we saw last session, which we were helpful in defeating in the New York legislature, that would have eliminated essentially the rights and interests of both the egg providers and the gestational mothers. It was really a bill designed to be serving only the interests of the intended parents, whether they be gay men or others. That is wrong. Any bill that goes forward in a United States state should have provisions that safeguard everybody's interests. This is called the Child Parent Security Act. We see it as an historic opportunity to correct unsound practices and to represent the interests of all participants. These are sample features of what we see as a model commercial surrogacy bill, and we're working on this right now with our colleagues in New York State. One is a former head of the Maternal and Child Health Department in the city of New York. Several are professors of maternal and child health at NYU or Columbia University. These are people who are extremely supportive of all forms of parenting and family formations, but they are with us on this question of ensuring a bill that recognizes the rights of everyone. First, there should be only single embryo transfer. Most European countries do not allow double or triple embryo transfers anymore. We have just too much evidence about the risks to the mother and the baby. It's just not right. It's a little more controversial in the United States because we don't have universal health care. So each time you do an embryo transfer, it's usually out of pocket. Very few states cover this. In Europe, it's usually not something you pay out of pocket. Nonetheless, the well-being and the safety of the mother and the baby, the mother giving birth, the baby, really should be primary. Second, only medically indicated cesarean sections. One of the huge problems with the Indian commercial surrogacy situation is that almost every birth came about via cesarean section. Absolutely no attention to the increased risk for both mother and baby. And most of the commissioning or intended parents were not well versed in these risks. So they just went along with what was really for the convenience of the clinic for most people involved. Coverage of the gestational mother's healthcare expenses, including some postpartum care, we're suggesting possibly up to 8 weeks. Could be longer. Assigning parentage at birth to the gestational mother as one of the legal parents until she relinquishes such rights. The original bill had codified that she would relinquish her rights before the baby was born. Absolutely wrong. I won't get into every reason why now, but we are adamantly opposed to that. We are supported in our view by one of the senior professors at Boston University School of Law and School of Public Health, Professor George Annis. And I'm sure you have read some of his materials here because he was the public health and legal editor for the New England Journal of Medicine for many years. And although he's in his late 70s now, he's still not retired. He still has a full teaching role. He's a brilliant professor. Establishing a mandatory registry to collect safety data and allow for long-term follow-up of egg providers, we now have a chance to insist that we collect long-term data through this bill. We think we should use that opportunity. Information about genetic and gestational parentage will be made available to offspring once they reach legal adulthood. We must listen to the thousands of offspring who have said, you must retain this information. When we turn 18, some places it's a different age, but we want to be able to find out who our genetic parents are. And it's not information you have a right to deny us. Now, obviously, with some of the genetic testing that we have available, and many of us, want to know about ancestry and all of that, you can put your name into some of these companies that collect such information, and they will match depending upon whether people wish to be matched up. So there is a way, in some cases, to find out who your genetic parents were. And we know of adoptees who've done that. They have literally found their birth parents through some of these genetic services. Restriction of technologies such as nuclear genome transfer and CRISPR. We'll get to that in a minute. But this arena of commercial surrogacy is also a gateway, and I consider it a backdoor gateway, to human germline genetic engineering, which we oppose. There's a little more about gene editing now. CRISPR, which is the major way of gene editing now, CRISPR-Cas9, stands for Clustered Regulated Interspaced Short Palindromic Repeats. To the hallmark of the bacterial defense system that forms the basis for CRISPR-Cas9 genome editing technology. Recently in the news is a complementary approach called prime editing, and I won't get into that. Genome editing is a way of making changes to specific parts of a genome. Scientists have been able to alter DNA since the 1970s, but in recent years they have developed faster, cheaper, and more precise methods to add, remove, or change genes in living organisms. Researchers are working to develop therapies that use gene editing to treat children or adults for a range of conditions, including sickle cell, hemophilia, and some forms of cancer and blindness. And we want to say that we are in no way opposed to what we call somatic cell therapy. Since 2015, a few laboratories have been experimenting with a far more controversial use of CRISPR, editing the genomes of early human embryos, eggs, and sperm. If edited embryos are used to start a pregnancy, the changes affect every cell in the body of any resulting child, that child's offspring, and all future offspring. Dozens of countries already prohibit any attempt to start a pregnancy with edited embryos, yet some scientists seem eager to forge ahead with this ethically problematic experiment. And you saw last year what happened in China with reportedly the first 2 babies born as a result of such gene editing. Fortunately, there's been a response from some of the top scientists, not just in the United States, but elsewhere. In the United States, they call for a moratorium on using CRISPR for germline genetic engineering, and I refer you to this article earlier this year in the Washington Post. Included here is Eric Lander, who's one of the founders of the Broad Institute, which does a huge amount of genetics research. It's based at MIT and Harvard and Cambridge, Massachusetts. Until many critical research issues are resolved, OBOS, that's our bodies, our cells, my organization, and the Center for Responsible Genetics believe that there needs to be much more public discourse about the important distinctions between human germline genetic modifications and modification of other human cells. If you are experimenting with somatic cells, my skin cells, my organ cells, non-gametes, non-embryos, you're just affecting me. You're not affecting future offspring. You're not engaging in what is I would consider an unethical experiment on future offspring. And there's a lot to be learned from somatic cell therapy, from gene editing with these somatic cells, not germline cells. So we do not believe gene editing should be used in conjunction with surrogacy arrangements, though we know there are people suggesting this. And I lead you to this wonderful website at the Center for Genetics and Society for a much more in-depth discussion of gene editing and some of the controversies that are out there. I don't know if you all know who Lee Silver is. Ever hear of him? Lee Silver is, I think, still a professor of molecular biology at Princeton University. Many years ago, maybe 15 years ago, he and I debated at Boston University in one of their great debates on the subject of whether cloning of human beings should be acceptable. And he took the position yes, and I took the position no. I want to tell you why I won that debate, but anyway. He is somebody who believes that anything goes. You know, the flood, you know, let's open the gates. He has co-founded an organization, it's a private company called Gene Peaks, which is basically espousing this approach to editing your offspring before they're born, before there may be even embryos implanted. He's like what I call a Wild West cowboy in this field. So there are people like Lee Silver out there. And I close with this. This is my favorite, principle. You know the precautionary principle of public health. You have to teach it in every public health school. So, in the absence of evidence of harm, you are required to establish policies that will guarantee the safety and the health and well-being of the public. You do not need incontrovertible proof about whether a particular project going forward will or will not necessarily harm the health of human beings. And I'm going to use as an example our efforts to stop the Wayne compressor station in Massachusetts right now. You can pass this around. As an active member of Mothers Out Front, which is an environmental change organization, we are promoting greater use of renewable energies, stopping the gas leaks, especially in places like Massachusetts. We have thousands of gas leaks, both wasteful, emitting gas right into the air, but it's already killed thousands of trees. As you know, that gas is toxic to trees. But one of the things we're trying to do is stop the expansion of pipelines, which will guarantee our future dependency on fossil fuels, rather than start to wean ourselves from fossil fuel dependence. It's going to take time to do that. And Enbridge is a very large company, sort of like Lydia and what they're trying to do in Amistad. It's a very powerful company that is trying to continue with the final 2 permits it needs so that it can finish building this compressor station, so that the gas, much of it is fracked, by the way. This is much more problematic gas than the old natural gas that used to come through the pipelines. Come right from Massachusetts into Canada and then go under the ocean. We're not even going to use this gas in Massachusetts. Our Attorney General is on our side. She has been against this pipeline. It is being built in an area that is very densely populated. There's a school nearby. There's lots of people who live there. We have had experiences in the United States with these compressor stations blowing up, a couple in California. Fortunately, they were not in areas well populated by human beings. I mean, we're mostly remote areas. It is insane that this should go forward. So we're taking the position. We already have evidence these things go up. We're using the precautionary principle of public health. And we're saying you must not give the final 2 permits to Enbridge. Our governor, Charlie Baker, as some of you may know, he's a Republican who's progressive on social issues. He still appears to be in the pocket of the fossil fuel industry. He has not denied these permits, and I believe that today is the last day for which he has to say yes or no. So I'm going to be looking online to find out eagerly whether or not we have succeeded. But I urge all of you who are in public health to constantly remember this precautionary principle, that absence of evidence of harm is not the same as proof of safety. And when you have enough anecdotal evidence of harm, it behooves you to institute policies and practices that will guarantee safety and health and well-being of the people in your community. And this is especially important when you have enormous money interests who care more about the bottom line than the health and safety of the public. So with that, we have 15 minutes for discussion, and it's your turn. There must be a few questions. Yes?
At one point you mentioned some risks of psychological harm to children of commercial surrogacy arrangements. Has there been much evidence on whether that psychological harm is real?
This is an area where we have a lot to learn. There are some studies that show adoptees have suffered by the privacy and the lack of information. Some of these are done by social workers, some by psychologists. What is going to be interesting is whether or not the results of surrogacy arrangements, the results of many of these ARTs procedures, whether those offspring are going to exhibit the same concerns. Social workers I know believe that there won't be that much difference in the sense that the issues are around my origins and my access to information about my origins. And if I find out later that, my genetic parents are different, there are couples raising children for whom they are not either father or mother a genetic parent. There might be fallout from this. We know of examples where accidentally information was given to the child, and the child became a teenager. And there was such a rupture in the relationship with the parents that it took years to heal. And in fact, sometimes the parents were not forgiven. It is a question of honesty for some of these offspring, not all of them, because I know adoptees who didn't care at all, had no interest in seeking out their birth parents, and I know adoptees for whom it was a lifelong journey. It meant so much to know about their origins. The fact is that people are curious, and we can be sure that some offspring who might have a question about it, like, for example, they look nothing like their parents. They might, was this, and then they start reading. They might start sending off their genetic information to one of these banks that collects them, find a match, and then realize that their social parents were not their genetic parents. And it might upset them and cause a lot of emotional harm. Will it cause permanent psychological damage? I doubt it myself, but we don't know. But I think it can create rifts in human relations that would be avoidable. As we know from all the open adoptions and the sharing of information to children that they're adopted, for the most part, that has been a better way to go. And I think we should learn from the adoption field as we have more and more of these surrogacy arrangements. So we don't have the answer to your question completely, but those are just some of my thoughts.
Interesting.
Yes.
I mean, adoption is one comparison, but also I'm reminded that I read some articles that said that people worried that in the early 1970s, with the development of IVF technologies, that there would be psychological harms to the children. But it seems like children who are the products of IVF technology don't experience
No, and in fact, most of those examples of early IVF, the ones that are in the studies, they actually, most of the time, use the gametes of both parents. It, over time, changed. Now, if you're a woman in her late 30s, and I know many such women, and you're going to have children, the fertility center is going to recommend that you not use your own eggs. Increasingly, women, even if they're the ones who are going to get pregnant and the embryo is going to be implanted in them, they're encouraged to be using younger women's eggs, not their own. The father usually uses his sperm. But in a case where the father may have some fertility, they're using donor sperm and they're using donor eggs. And in some cases, the woman is still gestating. She's still becoming a birth mother, but not always. So what we're seeing is in the world of ARTs, there's been a transitioning into what is almost universally now a 5-parent constellation. In the old days of IVF, it was still usually 2 parents. But when we use the assisted, that's why it's called assisted reproductive technology, because we're assisting these 2 people. It's morphed into something very different now. Yes?
Can you talk about Indian women's becoming donors of eggs? Is there a trend of Indianization in the United States? I mean, is there many Americans who use Indian women eggs? And is it obvious?
What happened is that Indian women were largely being used as gestational mothers. They weren't providing the eggs, and they weren't providing the sperm. And so the babies looked like the parents or the donors from another country. That was almost universally the case. But in India, amongst Indian parents, particularly middle-class parents, and a third of India now has, middle-class families who can afford this, those were didn't matter as much. They were, sometimes they had infertility problems. They would use donor sperm from other Indian men. Sometimes they would use eggs from another Indian woman. There was no question the child would be born there and the parents lived there. The real question that we had back when we were talking to our Indian colleagues is that, number one, these women were forced to live in homes where their movements were restricted. They sometimes weren't allowed to even go out and walk enough, not very good actually. Their diet was restricted. They couldn't see their family, their other children for months at a time. And then, of course, there was required cesarean section. These were not ideal conditions. And in some cases, women were not paid what they were promised. And there was no oversight. So it's a good thing the Indian government banned this practice. And they decided to ban it for even Indians after a while because they felt it was just too problematic in so many ways. That doesn't mean that you don't have altruistic surrogacy, as I mentioned.
And can I ask another question?
Yes.
Why is it unethical, the gene editing for the offspring, Why is it unethical? Why do you think that it's not good, it's unethical to edit genes for offsprings, say for the children?
We are talking about editing embryos or gametes, not about somatic cells. Like if you have hemophilia, if you have one of these conditions we're studying now, that's not unethical because you are not conducting experiments that affect future generations. There are a lot of potential problems here, and I'll tell you, when they were doing somatic cell nucleotransfer experiments on mice, trying to think about some of the possibilities here, there were many anomalies. They were likely to have cancer. There were many problems with the mice that suggested a problem would occur in humans. We do not want to be experimenting with germline cells where the changes would affect all future generations. Let's stick with the therapy that affects just me or just you or just a child, where you have informed consent, where they still not know the results, and maybe the results are problematic, but it stops with you. It doesn't go on to all future generations. That's why it's important to distinguish between that kind of gene editing with somatic cells and gene editing with things like embryos and gametes, where you are doing germline editing. And that's where most of the scientists who are reputable are now saying we should not be doing it.
I was wondering if there are any discussions about donors' rights to stay anonymous.
Yes. That was one of the bullet points. In Europe now, the practice is generally, if you are providing sperm or even eggs, gametes of any sort, do not provide sperm or eggs unless you accept being contacted when the child, if there is a child born of your gametes, comes of age and wants to find you out. Increasingly, and situation, they are keeping this information. The child becomes 18 or whatever the age is. The child can find out who the donor parents were, providing the egg, providing the sperm. But that person is counseled way back in the beginning. Do not do this unless you're willing to be contacted, because that is our policy in this country, because we know the offspring feel that it's their human right to know this. Now, it does mean some people will not provide their gametes because they don't want to be contacted later. They want complete privacy. But it also means that the children who are produced will have access to this information if they want it. I think we have some good evidence from some studies that it reduces the number of gamete providers, but not that many. You know, the problem is you don't know 18 years later if it's going to be okay to be contacted or not. And sometimes you think, oh, it'll be fine. And 18 years later, you don't think it's so fine. But that we can't predict. But I think the rights of these children born by these arrangements should trump anything like your rights to privacy. And if there's an inkling of concern about this, you shouldn't provide your gametes. There's a proposal now in the United States to have what we call an opt-in situation, or to allow there to be a change of mind. That's being debated as well. But I think, given the surveys I've seen, that most young people would be okay with this. And actually, for some of the donor sperm folks, some of them with 28, 30 years old, you would think that a young man would know by then if it's okay, and you know, he's 48 or something to be contacted. It would be okay. You'd think you'd know by then. Obviously, you can't know for sure. But I think this is where we have to listen to the thousands of offspring who've spoken up. They're just, Donor Offspring has a website. You can go there and read what the offspring say. These are donor offspring from various ERT procedures. They're pretty universal in their cry for defending their human rights here. Yes?
New York Times had an article a couple months ago about a young man who discovered he had multiple siblings. He was a product of his sperm.
Use the mic, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. There was an article in the New York Times about a young man who was a product of a sperm donor, and he discovered he had multiple siblings, half-siblings, and he discovered there were numerous others like him who had multiple siblings, and I was wondering what are the new controls and what have you seen around the world of that issue?
So in Spain, you are restricted to 6. No more than 6 babies to be produced by anyone's gametes. One of the problems is that they do not want to see a lot of intermarriage among these children who may be sisters and brothers. And that's, especially if you're in a community that's close-knit. I've seen other proposals for 12. This is something that is being considered by the New York State Legislature. But unless you keep good records, you cannot know. Now, we can tell you, we know examples in the United States where 100 children were produced by one man's sperm. It was actually a physician who did this. That's not okay. Now, is there a magic number? I don't know. But I think we do, when we start regulating this field, we do have to think about limits to the number of children produced by the gametes of one person. I don't know if Spain is right about this or not, and I don't remember the other figures in the chart, but other countries have rules as well. But you're right that it is something to be considered. Do you have an opinion?
Well, I'm just wondering, does this mean that we move to a point where when you get a marriage test, a marriage license, not only do you get a syphilis test, but maybe you have to get a genetic test, because if you're in a small community, well, how do you know that you're not going to be married to your half-sibling? So,
Well, if you institute these practices and policies now, it's still soon enough, I think, to protect the public health. I'm not sure you need to be collecting DNA information for that purpose, unless we were to keep the floodgates wide open and have more and more of this without any sort of regulation. There are there's one very large sperm bank, I think it's in Los Angeles or New York, that is now already doing this. They're internally deciding to limit the number of offspring from a single donor sperm. I don't know if there's anything like this being done for women's eggs. It's a good question. Any other questions? Oh, I realize we're already at 2 o'clock, so maybe this is a good point to stop, and I encourage you to use the websites, get back to the materials that are at our website and over here in the slides, and think about what you want for Armenia. There is already surrogacy going on here. There's already a fair amount of use of ART procedures, and it might be smart to institute policies before you have the problems that we've seen in other countries. That's one reason for this talk, is to think preventively. Thank you.
Thank you so much for informing us about this important issue and thinking about stuff that we never thought about. So this was really informative. Thank you very much.
If anyone